Bien, alors comme vous l'avez vu, la session va se dérouler en anglais. La bonne nouvelle, c'est que Tomm va parler lentement, qu'il a un accent irlandais pas trop prononcé. Moi, j'essaierai de résumer peut-être à chaque partie un petit peu ce qui a été dit. On ne va pas faire une traduction simultanée, c'est vraiment trop compliqué, c'est trop long. On a essayé d'organiser quelque chose sous une base chronologique qui permette à chacun de suivre un peu l'itinéraire de Tomm. Donc maintenant, je vais basculer sur l'anglais. Et puis, on essaiera de garder un petit peu de temps, comme d'habitude, à la fin, pour avoir des questions de la salle. Autant profiter de la présence de Tomm parmi nous, du retour de Tomm parmi nous. Voilà. So, this session will last roughly 1 hour. It's going to be in English, and we are very pleased to welcome Tomm. As Xavier just mentioned, it's like a kind of a reunion tour for the both of us, because we've been traveling a lot with The Secret of Kells in 1999, and one of the most important events of this launch was obviously the screening in Annabay. I think it was the only screening in Annabay we had for Secret of Kells, and if you know the movie, you understand why it is so important to do it. So, we're going to follow chronology. We're going to start with Tomm's childhood, going not too far, don't worry. I think there is no need to introduce Tomm. He's a very talented, still young, Irish director with 2 animated features who both ended at the Oscar ceremony selection. With huge success in many countries, many festivals. So it's a great pleasure, I think, for us to have Tomm with us today. The first thing we're going to start with, obviously, we're going to skip childhood, and we're going to start with...
we go backwards afterwards.
Yeah, after that, yeah. So we're going to start with like the turning point, the beginning of your career, already a turning point. You started with a turning point, launching a studio. The studio is named Cartoon Saloon, and I think we should start with you telling us not only why you decided to, at a very early stage, because you were still at school, in an art school, why did you decide to launch a studio? Was it because of the situation of Irish animation in those days, because of your intention to develop your own movies? And I think it's important maybe for you to introduce what Cartoon Saloon is all about in terms of content and what you're doing now, and then we'll come back why you decided to do it.
I mean, thanks, JP. I'm happy to be back for our reunion gig, the comeback tour. I will show the showreel, the latest showreel of Cartoon Saloon first, because maybe not everybody in the audience is familiar with our work, and then you'll get, maybe the pictures will be clearer than words of the kind of thing that our studio focuses on, the kind of animation that we do. Okay, so I'll just play that first. Yeah, come back.
So this is what Cartoon Saloon is all about today, but back in 1999, when you decided to launch this studio, what was your situation? You were a student at, what's the name of the school? Ballyfermot.
Yeah,
Ballyfermot in Dublin, college in Dublin. And why did you decide to launch a studio in Kilkenny, where you're still based now? And if I remember well, the studio was launched with friends you met at the school, Nora Tone and Paul Young.
That's right. Yeah. I had some photos from the early days, but they're so embarrassing. I didn't want to spend too much time with them on the screen. Yeah, basically, it's kind of easy to say in a soundbite that we set the studio up to make our own feature films, and that was definitely part of what was in our minds even when we were studying in Ballyfermot College. But you said before at one of the screenings that it's kind of a mini miracle that The Secret of Kells, Brendan and Secret of Kells got made, and for me it's the same with Cartoon Saloon. So many threads came together that it's hard to put my finger on exactly how we ended up like 16 years, 17 years later with the studio that we have now. But when I was preparing for this presentation, I was thinking about the fact that we began the studio in the premises of Young Irish Filmmakers, and that was a group that I'd been a member of since I was 14. And I didn't join Young Irish Filmmakers with big ambitions to make animated feature films. It was just that I'd heard that there was girls there, and I went to an all-boys school, and so...
That's a good reason.
Yeah, and it worked out pretty well because I met my wife there. And that was in an old orphanage, so it's also important to kind of emphasize how, when I look back on it, how almost ridiculously humble it was compared to our ambition. You know, it was like an old orphanage that had been converted into kind of an art centre, and Young Irish Filmmakers was a part of that, and they had some rooms in the old orphanage, and so we learned the very basics of filmmaking there, even using like 16mm cameras and things like that. And myself and Ross Stewart, who's still part of the studio, Aidan Hart, who created our first TV series Skunk Fu, and we were all members, and Ross Murray also, who was a part of the studio for a long time too. We were all members of Young Irish Filmmakers together. But myself and Ross and Aidan went to Ballyfermot to study animation. And at the time, we imagined that we maybe would work for like the Don Bluth studio, which was still in Dublin, or Jimmy Murakami, or some of the American studios that were in Dublin at the time. But by the time we graduated in 1999, they were all gone. The word on the street was that 2D animation was dead. And basically, most of our friends got jobs in video games. You know, they went to England to work in video games. And we kind of retreated back to the Young Irish Filmmakers, where they gave us a space for free to try and set something up. And we had the dream of making what would become Brendan and the Secret of Kells, and trying to just make our own projects and find a way to keep doing hand-drawn animation.
Okay, so there was a lack of studios in those days. I mean, it was the time when US studios closed, and there was no lack of producers too, because the studio was based on the development of your own work, or the work of Nora, or the work of Ross. Because it's funny to see that 17 years after, the team basically is still the same. Yeah. It's not that often that people can stay together and going through up and downs. And was it because you had specifically the intention of your first animated feature, or you wanted to do some short, and you wanted to bring in new talents, or was it first for your small team you wanted to develop the studio Cartoon Saloon?
Yeah, I think that's enough time on those embarrassing photos. But anyway, you can see how basic it was at the very beginning, and it was almost completely on paper. I've only got one photo with a computer in it as well, so it's so long ago now, and it is hard to believe it is so long ago. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it was mainly the fact it was like twofold. On one hand, it was a way to... We imagined we could make the Secret of Brendan and the Secret of Kells in like 2 years, and we thought we could do it by doing like little commercials and work for hire. So it was a way to kind of have an extension of the college experience. We kind of were extending what the group that had formed, myself and Nora and Paul, And we'd started to do work for hire in college on the side, like part-time, and it was a way to try and formalize that. But we didn't, at the beginning, really believe, I don't think for the first few years, that it was going to be for the rest. You know, I always used to think eventually I'd get a real job, but this would be like a launching pad to go have a better portfolio to get a real job, you know.
And you're still there.
We're still there.
Still active as a studio.
And I think that one of the things I like best about that showreel I showed is that it's completely projects that were developed in-house. I mean, there's some short films there that were directed and designed by artists like Adrian Mergeau, who came and joined the studio later. And then there's the features that I directed or co-directed, and the TV series that were created and developed in-house. So we've kind of gone from being 50% or more than 50% work for hire, just doing work to get paid, to developing and creating our own projects, which was the dream really early on, even if it seemed kind of impossible. It only took 16 years to get to that place.
And it is obvious that you're right from the beginning, you've been involved in various areas of the business. I mean, the business is more Paul Young as a producer, but yourself acting as a producer, you've been involved in storyboarding, graphic design, animation, drawings, directing. You already had that in mind when you end up your school, your college in Dublin in '99? You really wanted to cover everything? Was it your intention, you know, to be totally in charge? I mean, to try to have a good knowledge of all aspects of what artistic creation can be?
Yeah, it was a mixture of necessity and, like, we learned a lot on the job. I definitely learned a lot. Like, on Brendan, I learned a lot about storyboarding from Remy Chaillet, who was the assistant director and the main storyboarder.
Who is with us today.
And basically my idea was that if I could fill the studio with people who were better than me at all those things, I could learn from them. And I feel like that's the best thing about the studio, is that I'm constantly learning, not just from Nora and Paul, but from everybody who comes into the studio. I just included some slides from the early days, because these comics, actually at the very start...
Yeah, I forget to mention, you're also involved in comic books.
Well, at the very beginning, and here's Couch Potato, and these kind of short films, and that's Nora's first film, Cooling Dulach, about a kid whose head was... He's born with his head on backwards. Very strange film. Anyway, but those were the kind of... those are like the cave paintings. Those are like the prehistory to the Cartoon Saloon that you discovered with DDA when we met you in 2001. And in that period, I was really experimenting and trying everything. Like those first short films, they were almost not even films. They were just a way to sort of try different things. And over those first few years, we kind of, with Nora's narrative films, which had stories to them at least, those were the projects that were keeping us enthusiastic about keeping going with the studio, despite the fact that most of the time we were, you know, basically living on beans and toast. It was to make our own projects, and to make our own projects we had to do a little bit of everything. So Paul became known as like Paul Hollywood Young, because he was the one who was willing to draw the least and to go out into the world and kiss babies and shake hands, and he always tells us...
He's doing that very well.
Yeah, and he goes back to drawing now and then. He's actually a really talented artist too, but he was the one that was willing to do that the most. And then Nora and I focused on kind of the creative leadership of the studio.
Okay, so a few words in French, if you don't mind.
Of course, go for it.
Summarize. Donc, quelques mots en français pour ceux qui n'auraient pas trop suivi. Je pense que jusque-là, c'est assez clair. Une école d'art à Dublin, dont ils ont le diplôme en 99. Ils sont plus que trois, enfin trois en tout cas, à créer le studio. Nora et Paul et Tomm. C'est l'époque où les studios américains qui ont des studios localisés en Irlande ont tendance à fermer, donc il n'y a pas vraiment un dynamisme de l'existence de la structure de studio. Eux décident donc de prendre leur propre destin en main, avec des intentions assez larges, puisqu'il y avait à la fois ces développements artistiques qu'ils ont eus quand ils étaient étudiants, qui les amenaient à vouloir faire des films courts, voire penser à des longs métrages, mais il y avait aussi une intention économique pour pouvoir survivre, qui consistait à travailler pour d'autres producteurs, pour d'autres productions, ce qu'ils ont fait dès le début, qui a permis au studio d'avoir un équilibre économique, en tout cas, qui leur a permis de mener les premiers projets. Voilà pour la première partie, un tout petit peu résumée. So, we move to Brendan and the Secret of Kells, which is, I mean, confusion for you, because in France it's Brendan, and in the rest of the world it's the Secret of Kells.
And all through production it was Brendan, so I just have to remember that that's what we...
Yeah.
And before it was Brendan and the Secret of Kells, it was called Rebel. So
yeah. So yeah, go back to Rebel.
Yeah.
Because in fact, when you launch a studio and when you decide to create Cartoon Saloon, if I remember well, you already had some work done on Rebel.
Yeah.
The project was already in development phase at the time you launched the studio.
Yeah, basically, in my final year of studying in Ballyfermot College, I discovered Richard Williams' film, The Thief and the Cobbler. And even more inspiring than the film, which was really inspiring to me, was the documentary about how he made it, you know. And he was making it on the side of doing work for hire. And that's more or less how I got the idea for Cartoon Saloon, that we would try to make Rebel while doing like commercials and things like that. And I remember telling his son, Alex Williams, when I met him, that I'd gotten the first business plan idea for Cartoon Saloon from that documentary. And his son like fell underneath the table laughing because he thought it was the worst business plan. And he said, I can't believe you copied your business plan from my father. Because The Thief and the Cobbler famously had gone bankrupt. But anyway. And they never finished the film. And I remember when I told Didier this influence, he was, don't talk about that. It's not going to be like that. But no, when we first set up, that was kind of what we were doing. We were trying to earn enough money to work on this project. And it was really the project that we learned about everything, like how to raise the finance, how to write a script when we worked with Fabrice, how to work with the music with Bruno. We learned everything it was almost like a training film and our first professional feature, so it was a bit naive in some ways, but the mini miracle happened and it came together.
So that's why in 2001, so 2 years after the launch of the studio and a couple of years after the beginning of thinking about Secret of Kells, you attend Cartoon and you met a couple of producers and people from all over Europe, coming with an interesting presentation from this movie called Rebel.
Yeah.
And
I can show the trailer that we showed.
Yeah,
then.
maybe you can do that.
The story is like, this is a page from the Book of Kells, which is a famous manuscript in Ireland, and all the kind of Celtic design and that Ireland was known for was really inspired by this manuscript. And we had the idea, after seeing things like The Thief and the Cobbler, that maybe we could use Celtic art as the inspiration for a hand-drawn feature film. And that's what we started to develop already in our final year of college. And then the first couple of years of the studio, we were naively thinking we could make the movie. And at a certain point in the first year, we went, actually, we learned enough. I think someone gave us some advice that we should just make a trailer and try and write a script and try and present that at Cartoon Movie. So that's what we did in 2001. I'll show it.
It shows the
it's pretty,
Rebel.
It's actually, went and got it captured from a VHS tape. So this is like a, it's so old now. But what was a couple of things, just making the trailer was like a...
Do you remember when the church was young and Ireland the treasure?
The idea that we'd make a trailer before the film was even made was something we didn't even know was a thing that was done, you know. We had to learn everything about the business from scratch, because in Ballyfermot all we learned was how to be animators and layout artists and so forth. So all the aspects of producing a feature we were learning the hard way, you know. Mm-hmm. So this was the trailer we cut together from the footage that we had managed to do. And it was really exciting for us that Paul's dad had a friend who played fiddle in a pub with Brendan Gleeson. And Brendan Gleeson was the actor that we had in mind for the main character. And through that tenuous connection, we managed to drive up to Brendan Gleeson's house in Dublin and record the voiceover for the trailer in his sitting room. So it was really like...
Which was young, and Ireland the treasure at its centre. I never saw the island of Iona, but my vointeur spoke of it often. He spoke of a community of creativity and peace, alone on the dark sea like a jewel. I never felt the heat of that night's inferno. I never heard my dying brother's screams, but I know well the flames, for they have illuminated my world.
The music was also by Keela, an Irish band who ended up working with Bruno Coulet on the final score.
Rebel tells the story of the Irish monks who wrote the Book of Kells. Against the backdrop of the creation of Ireland's greatest masterpiece, Brother Cahir and Brother Eamon escaped from the Viking fire to the newly built monastery of Kells. There they face a new threat to their freedom, their beliefs, and indeed their lives.
How much hair I have in this little bit of footage. I'm so proud of it.
So all elements from
Celtic art and
what
themes,
ended up as
a team of talented young
Secret of
artists
Kells
are
was
bringing
there,
this
but
dramatic story to life. Rebel is a
the
classic
project
animated feature.
went through various important phases of evolution and development. So it was in 2001, some people, or many people attending the cartoon movie noticed the interest of such a project.
Rebel.
But I think
Turning darkness into light.
most of us came with remarks and comments regarding the difficulty to improve the project, and one being very active is obviously Didier Brunner from Les Amateurs, who is with us today. But we also had some involvement from Belgium, and we had concern not too much with the drawings or the characters, but more on the story.
Yeah.
So for you, because you've been working on that for a couple of years with Nora also co-directing, and was it easy to accept the fact that many changes needed to happen to make it what's going to be finally be Secret of Kells? Because this was your first major project, so I suppose it's always difficult to accept modification, even if it's improvement. But to have people not taking over, but being suddenly very involved in all development phase of of the movie.
Yeah, we a lot of interesting things happened around that time, because originally Aidan Hart and I were going to co-direct it, and he had the idea for Skunk Fu as well. And what happened was he didn't want to change it from how we'd imagined it, and he wasn't as interested in rewriting or being part of that process, and he was happy then to just focus on Skunk Fu. And that was going to be our first TV series, and I was left to focus on this alone. So I had a couple of years just working alone. Didier had a lot of input. I mean, it's amazing when I look at that crappy old trailer, the potential that Didier was able to see, but he was able to kind of guide us and give good advice into how to take the elements that were working and reject the elements that weren't, and to hone the visual style. And then with the story, I mean, we had done a few drafts, both Aidan and myself, and it really was not a movie that was going to work for the target audience that Didier had in mind. And I thought it was a good opportunity to learn about screenwriting. And Didier suggested that we work with Fabrice Silkowski. And I remember the first meeting with him. Fabrice was like really excited because he felt, you know, Didier was a famous producer. This was going to be the next project, and I had already been working on the project for so long and had seen it go through so many changes and had my hopes go up and down. That Fabrice was like, "You don't seem so excited," and I was like, "I'm just treating it like I'm going to learn a lot about script writing, and maybe that's as far as it will go." And that's how I kind of kept myself sane, because I was learning a lot about pitching a feature by making a trailer. I was learning a lot about developing a feature by working with Didier. I was learning a lot about making an independent film that had to look very different to like American films or Japanese films that might have influenced me. So I felt that each stage was almost complete in itself, like getting to a point where Didier and Vivian, the co-producers, felt that we had a design style that was unique and possible to make for the kind of budget we could raise was a lesson for me, and I was happy to do that. And working with Fabrice to turn this kind of crazy art school story into something that could work for a wider audience was going to be a lesson in itself for me. So I felt that I tried to make it that I could be happy if it only went as far as each stage, you know, rather than always being frustrated that it wasn't going into production, because it was like literally 10 years from the time we had the first idea in '99 to the time that we showed it here in Fontevraud in 2009. So it was quite an epic. It was most of my 20s, you know, it was spent on that project. So I tried to keep myself sane through all the changes by just being happy that I was learning at each step, you know.
But I suppose it's not that easy when you have, because it's a very personal project, also very much related to your background, to Ireland, to Irish history. I mean, to have people getting on board, such as Fabrice, French-American scriptwriter, then to have a musician such as Bruno Coulet being involved, of course, with an Irish band, as you mentioned, Kila. So, and also I think it was probably difficult for you basically starting your own company a couple of, 2 years before, and suddenly to start not with an specifically Irish project, but suddenly putting together a true pan-European production with Belgium very involved and France obviously even more. So it wasn't it too difficult for you to make this move?
It was stressful, and I think the tension between me trying to protect what I imagined was important about the project was what made it work, because everybody else who came in were helping to make the project be more than a little art school project, and really so I appreciate it, and I felt quite protected. Like both Didier, Fabrice, Bruno, they were all very respectful of what we were trying to do. They weren't trying to turn it into something that would sell toys in McDonald's or something. I mean, when I watched the Triplets of Belleville and Kirikou and discovered Didier's filmography, I knew he wasn't the kind of producer who was going to try and turn it into something that I didn't want it to be. So I felt that that process was a learning process, but I was definitely overwhelmed and intimidated by the time I really believed it was going to go into production. And in 2005, it finally seemed that it was going into production. And not only was it going into production, but some of my crew were going to have to be shared with Aidan's project, Skunk Fu. And I felt really like, oh, it's going to be really crazy for us to go from like 10 or 15 people in a few rooms in an old orphanage to like a new building. Like the studio had to grow to about 70 people. it was really overwhelming, and I hadn't yet directed a narrative piece. I'd made comics and I'd done commercials.
You had one or two shorts, no?
The shorts to me are just experiments. And most of the time my shorts that I made were just a way to try a technique or, you know. But Nora had made some narrative short films that I'd either been an art director or animator on. And so I asked her to be co-director at that point because I felt I needed somebody who had, you know, I feel like a bit of a co-pilot, let's say, because it just felt quite overwhelming, the scale of what we were taking on when I finally believed it actually was going to happen, you know.
And in terms of the script, working with Fabrice, who is, as I said, Franco-American, French-American, with no real knowledge of Irish history or the Book of Kells or Middle Age in Ireland, was it difficult for you to accept the involvement of somebody not as aware as you are of what the background of the story is?
I wasn't too protective of that because I knew that it was a collaborative process, and I thought in fact it was actually beneficial to have somebody, you know, with no knowledge, because they would be the eyes of the general audience, because after all, even most kids in Ireland mightn't know really this history very well anymore. So I had to make something that was not too esoteric, and Fabrice was able to bring that sensibility, and he came to the studio, and I think he was excited about the project too for personal reasons. He identified with the story on a personal level, so I was pretty confident after, you know, we did some trips where we took him to the west coast of Ireland, and that became almost a tradition now in the studio that every time a key artist joins the team that we go on a trip to kind of show them the country and get their socks wet and all that stuff.
Well, the same thing happened with Bruno Coulet for the music. Bruno spent some time in Ireland meeting with Kila, and so the involvement of, because the music is obviously very important, Circuit of Kells. It's one of the key elements.
Even Fabrice was a little bit worried because he'd become so much part of the kind of the team by the time that Bruno was being suggested by Didier, that Fabrice was like, oh, but because he loves music, and he was like, but Irish music, that's the heart of it, you know. And but again, once we met with Bruno and Bruno met with the guys from Kila, it became obvious to us that Kila had a certain authenticity and a certain knowledge of traditional music, but they weren't composers. Like they weren't writing a film score, just like I wasn't a screenwriter. So the collaboration was really important there, and actually blossomed so much that worked with them again, and I hope to keep that team going. So that team really, I was just, again, it's another mini miracle. It could have been a disaster, but it worked out really well. Maybe I'll, just for comparison and for redemption, I'll show the final trailer before we move on. So we got better. The only thing that makes me a little bit sad is with the Secret of Kells. Well, I'll tell the story afterwards.
The Irish category.
I've lived too many ages. I have seen suffering in the darkness. Yet, I have seen beauty thrive in the most fragile of places. I have seen the book
So we kind of, I think, improved and refined the style over those years. But yeah, this story, oh, this is funny.
This is...
Also, I'm really sorry you're all watching me like fiddle around with buttons as I translate from French into English. But yeah, this is this room, isn't it?
Yes, that's the room, yeah. That's where we had the screening.
Look at this guy, he's got a...
I was much younger.
Yeah, he's got a portrait in the attic that gets older because he looks the same.
No, we had dinner in the restaurant down there, inside the avec.
So, yeah, I mean, the story really was that I was going to say is that it was quite, I remember it was my 31st birthday, the day that we had the premiere in Paris, and I was like, okay, I didn't waste my 20s, we did something, you know. But then the next challenge, like there's the story, 3 stories in making every movie I learned, and the first story is getting it made. How did it get made? The next story is the time you spend making it, which is probably the most important one because that's like years of your life. And then there's the story of what happens afterwards. And I always think the story of Secret of Kells is almost after it was finished, Brendan, after it was finished, is almost a story in itself because...
It lasts more than 2 years. I mean,
yeah, it was this...
Traveling all over the world and you traveling with the movie.
And we did our tour around France and we weren't disappointed, but we weren't really ecstatic with the release here. And then the release in Ireland was really well promoted. We were partnered with Disney, but the Irish audience were just like taken by surprise. They didn't know what to do with this film and they basically didn't show up to watch it. So I was kind of a little bit crushed at the beginning because I realized we had something special and critics were really kind, but the audiences weren't showing up. And so it was a really strange year, 2009 into 2010, because, you know, we won awards in places like Annecy, Zagreb, even in Asia, and slowly the movie stayed alive rather than going away. And even though I thought it was over and time to focus on what we were going to do next, maybe finally get a real job, and I seriously was looking at getting a real job in some of the studios in the US and stuff, and just complete surprise, the awards kind of grew and built up to the point where we had an Oscar nomination in that February of 2010. So
we started, in fact, in Berlin, because first we had a selection in Berlin, 2009, and we went there with a movie, not with ending with a prize, but at least there was some international recognition. Because for you, it was also new to discover the international market. I mean, to deal with people with different background, with different concern, with different...
And this journey was a whole other learning curve, like what happens to a movie after it's finished, and especially a small independent movie, how you have to promote it territory by territory, and you know, and you don't have a huge marketing campaign, so you really have to build on word of mouth, and that's harder and harder. But luckily with Secret of Kells, we managed to grow enough fans that it kind of stayed alive.
Before covering the Oscars, maybe I will do the French wrap-up.
With a nice picture of you.
Non, forget that, please.
Nice picture.
Donc, petit résumé, là on est en plein Secret of Kells, donc vous avez compris que c'était le premier projet qu'il a développé, en même temps, probablement qu'il a créé le studio, même un tout petit peu avant, donc avant 99. Il est arrivé donc en 2001 avec un projet qui s'appelait Rebelle, qui était donc déjà les prémices du Secret of Kells, au Cartoon Movie, c'était à Berlin. Et donc il a été repéré par pas mal de producteurs, une productrice belge et puis surtout Didier Brunner pour Les Armateurs en France. Et de manière générale, il y a pas mal d'investisseurs, parce que moi j'étais plutôt du côté investisseur à cette époque, en complément de Didier, qui ont manifesté un vrai intérêt parce qu'il y avait une originalité profonde sur ce projet-là. Et ce qui est intéressant, c'est d'entendre Tomm raconter les différentes étapes par lesquelles il est passé, puisqu'il part d'un projet très personnel, basé sur sa culture, basé sur une histoire qu'il avait quand même largement contribué à développer, avec sa partenaire co-réalisatrice Nora, qui est également dans le studio. Et donc, il s'est trouvé pendant 4 ans à travailler d'une manière très différente pour lui, puisque tout à coup, on était sur une coproduction entre la Belgique, la France et l'Irlande, avec un co-scénariste, donc malgré son nom, Fabrice Zgolkowski, qui est franco-américain, qui n'a pas de lien direct avec l'Irlande. D'autres suggestions sont venues de la France, à la fois au niveau de l'équipe technique, il n'en a pas encore parlé, il en parlera peut-être, mais il y a eu des talents français aussi qui ont commencé à travailler sur le film. Et puis bien sûr la musique de Bruno Coulet, qui s'est parfaitement entendu avec le groupe que lui-même avait en tête, qui est un groupe irlandais formidable qui s'appelle Killa. Donc on a essayé de couvrir là cet épisode assez long, hein, parce que là on est arrivé en 2009 avec la sortie, la présentation à Berlin, la présentation à Annecy, les sorties pas très réussies en Irlande parce que Disney l'a sorti comme un gros film, je pense, et d'une manière qui n'a pas évoqué grand-chose aux Irlandais. Pourtant, le livre de Kells, c'est quand même un des éléments de la culture irlandaise. Le même phénomène s'est un peu produit d'ailleurs, il ne l'a pas dit, mais en Belgique, où il y a une distribution massive, comme si c'était un gros film d'action américain. En France, ça a été un peu plus lent et plus subtil comme méthode. On a beaucoup utilisé Tomm, il est beaucoup venu en France. On a fait beaucoup de promotions et le film n'a pas atteint les scores qu'on espérait, mais par contre, on a eu une presse dithyrambique partout dans le monde, et ce qui a permis effectivement de trouver dans le cadre de ce développement un distributeur américain qui s'appelle G-Kids, qui est un distributeur indépendant, qui a cru au projet, qui a peut-être cru aussi à la connexion irlandaise existant à Hollywood. Il y a beaucoup d'Irlandais là-bas, et c'est l'histoire que maintenant va nous raconter Tomm, je pense, c'est-à-dire celle de la carrière internationale est réussie, mais maintenant il y a la cerise sur le gâteau qui est la nomination aux Oscars. So we can move to the Oscar nominations,
Sure.
the US release, and
Yeah, I mean, the fact that G-Kids founded their distribution arm out of the New York Children's Film Festival, another miracle of timing and, you know, right place at the right time. They barely qualified the film for the Oscar nomination, but there was enough support there amongst the animation community, and I think it caused a stir. Now it's become almost traditional that the Academy nominate a kind of outsider, but Secret of Kells, I think only Triplets of Belleville before that had really kind of broken into that category. So we
maybe with Japanese Miyazaki.
yeah,
was
of course,
with
well,
Miyazaki.
of course, and I think European animation has become less of an outsider since then. But at the time, yeah, it was either Japanese or American, or else it wasn't there. So it was really nice, and it kind of opened up a lot of doors for us. And I have all my nice holiday photos. So again, it's that mini miracle. When I put this together, I was thinking, like, it's so crazy when I see those photos in the old orphanage in '99, to standing there with all these big superstars, even actors and stuff in the Oscars, was an amazing journey in itself. And for me, but for the film, I was really happy that it got this kind of cult status, and it was kind of like, I took a sneaky photo. I was invited to the White House for St. Patrick's Day, and you can see me trying to take a picture of the president that I wasn't supposed to take, and you can see just behind him his bodyguard giving me an evil eye. And also the fact that, you know, we got on the list of the 100 greatest Irish films ever made in the Irish Times, and we get photos all the time of people who dress up as the characters. So it was really like little kids asking for their birthday cake to be a Secret of Kells birthday cake, or little drawings like this from kids that they send in to us of the character Aisling. It was really a lovely kind of end to the story, that the film didn't just disappear after all that work, that it continued to stay alive in some ways.
So one obvious question is, due to the success, or at least the media success, or the recognition of the movie, obviously some US studio probably started knocking on the door and telling you should work with them, you should do your own project, but within a studio frame. And what was your reaction? And why did you decide to keep on the kind of structure you developed for the first movie with the second one? Because the second one we're going to cover next, obviously is very similar in terms of co-production, European, and no real studio involvement. So what was your, because being very young, I suppose it's strange to be somehow asked by the US studio to join, and maybe there was a temptation for you to do that, to move to LA?
Not to LA, actually. It was funny. Before the Oscar nomination, and Secret of Kells had done really well critically, but the studio was in trouble. We'd spent too much money on both Secret of Kells and Skunk Fu, and we were kind of, after shrinking back down from like 70 people back down to a small team again, and it was starting to feel like maybe now is the time to get a real job. And at that time I was contacted by a studio in Portland, a stop motion studio, Leica, and myself and Ross Stewart were asked by the director there just to do design work. And I had started to do design work for them from Kilkenny. And then just literally, I think the day before the Oscar nomination, they offered us to come to Portland and work and, you know, just take a job in the studio as designers on the film. And I didn't sign the contract, but Ross did, because when we got the Oscar nomination, I realized there was an opportunity there to keep going with this project, which I'd already been thinking about during Secret of Kells, but had started to feel maybe was never going to happen, considering that Secret of Kells hadn't been the commercial success that maybe it might have been yet. So after the Oscar nomination, we had this idea in our head that maybe Song of the Sea would be somehow easier if we got all the money from one big American studio. And we talked to all of them basically, because that week before the Oscars, they more or less want to be sure, just in case you win, that they've been speaking to you. And then they kind of forget about you afterwards.
Next day.
But during that week, we talked to everyone, and we had some serious interest from some of the studios there. And I don't know if we wasted, but we spent, let's say, about maybe 6 months seriously considering different options and talking to agents about how we could go that route. And I just realized that there was no model like we have here in Europe, like what DDA built here in Europe, of this independent co-production model. So any of the studios, even if they wanted to, couldn't make Song of the Sea the way I had in mind. They wanted it to be somehow more commercial, maybe CG, maybe more contemporary.
Yes, it was even your intention to do stereoscopic CG.
Yeah, yeah. They had so many different ideas, and I even did a test with digital graphics in Belgium of how stereoscopic 2D would look, which I thought was great, but no, they wanted CG if we were going that way. So in the end, we realized that basically Plan A, which was another European co-production, was the most artistically interesting way to go forward with the project, that it wasn't the kind of project that would make sense to sell to a US studio, and it was better to make it almost like a follow-up to the Secret, like not a sequel, but like a follow-up to Secret of Kells, using everything we learnt on Secret of Kells and applying it to another film, you know.
Okay. So the second movie, animated feature, is again very much related to Irish history or tradition with the Selkies. And is it because you feel comfortable and well aware of these story elements, or you want to go a step further and try to open new areas in terms of concern, in terms of content, in terms of, or do you still have in mind a lot of stories based upon Irish history?
For me, and it's different for Nora and the other directors in the studio, but for me, it's like chain smoking. I keep lighting the next one off the end of the previous one. So they're kind of, like, I have one more that I'm developing now, which is again about Irish folklore. And I used to joke even during Secret of Kells that my next movie would be about girls in bikinis on a spaceship or something, just to do something. But I keep going. I think there's such a rich trove, and I feel I haven't quite yet done it justice. So there's always you want another bite at the apple. You want to go back to that source. And so the inspiration for Song of the Sea really came out of the things that I learned about researching Secret of Kells, basically.
Mm-hmm. So for this... Yeah, maybe we can show the clip of Song of the Sea.
Yeah, I have a little making of clip that I'll show. Yeah, so this was actually...
So this was another European, but a different co-production, because you had different partners, including Denmark, another French producer.
That was the weird challenge.
And Luxembourg.
Yeah, that was the weird challenge with Song of the Sea. It ended up being a kind of coalition of the willing, because we wanted to get started, you know, and we didn't want to wait for a long time to get into production, and so we ended up with a group of people, some like really new studios like Norlum in Denmark, which were essentially like Cartoon Saloon in the early days. They were set up by two guys who'd been interns in Cartoon Saloon, and in France it was with Jeremy and Clement, who we'd worked with on Sant Apprentice in Luxembourg. So we kind of just put together this coalition of the willing, to borrow George Bush's term, of just like little companies at different stages in their career that were interested to jump on straight away.
But is it a real difficulty? I mean, the risk to lose some of the energy because you have to split so much of work?
It really was scary, and we did it for a lower budget than Secret of Kells. But for me, it was the price I paid to be able to make it exactly how I wanted to. You know, I know we were the biggest fish in that pond, and so we were really the producer and the director, and you know, I was able to really have the final say on everything, which was at the time it felt that was the reason to make this film as opposed to going to a bigger studio. I hope this plays right, because I only have it embedded in the presentation. Okay, so I'll see if it plays. If it doesn't play, I'll stop it. It's a bit sticky, is it? It's how fast we worked. The big change, I think, with Song of the Sea was we moved from paper to TV paint as well, which was allowed us to be able to work with all those different studios more comfortably, because I could literally open TV paint files and draw notes and send it back, and the communication was, even if it felt a little bit like a betrayal of our traditional animation kind of roots, you know. Kind of stuttering a little bit. I think just if there's a little bit of Bruno.
Come up here to me.
Now, everybody ready for Saoirse to blow out the candles, huh? One big happy family.
This was another process we'd started on Secret of Kells, where we'd make scene illustrations that were as close as possible to the final picture. It was a way to control the look between all the studios. And this was the reunion between Keela and Bruno. Yeah. We sort of worked right from the beginning of storyboards with Bruno. The music was part of the writing process as well, you know.
Those stories that Mum told me, they're all true. Are you really a selkie?
Anyway, it's not really playing properly, but...
Okay. So, Song of the Sea, you didn't... you had less time to make it because you wanted to move fast.
Yeah,
I had fast in animation.
No.
But...
It was a scary realization that there's only so many movies you can make in a career, you know. Yeah. And I originally wanted to finish Song of the Sea before I was 35 and make another one before I was 40, but I'm 40 in a few months, so... Well,
you still have a long time to go.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to
talk a little bit.
The screenplay. It's interesting.
Yeah, it was a little different because when Fabrice came on to Secret of Kells, we'd already gone through a few drafts, and so he was kind of reinventing it according to what the project needed. But he was a little bit chained to the previous drafts. Whereas when the Irish Film Board suggested that we work with Will Collins, he was a little bit freer, I guess, because he was working with me at the same time. I had an idea for the story, a lot of ideas for the story.
But you came with a basic idea?
I had the basic structure of the story, but it was way too bloated. There was too many references to folklore, and what Will did was he really worked with me and with Nora too. She was kind of like the head of story, we called her. She was like working on the storyboards as well. And together we kind of crafted the story where he would write pages of the script, I would do storyboards. We went back and forwards. We'd show those to Bruno. We'd have sessions with Bruno and Keela, and sometimes something that seemed really talky, there would be a way to do that exposition with music. So involving all the key creatives, we were able to craft the film with all the main partners in mind. And so Will was kind of writing the script over about a year and a half with me, you know, doing beat boards, Adrian doing concept paintings, Bruno suggesting some music, and it was much more collaborative rather than a kind of linear process that we had on Secret of Kells.
You mentioned collaboration, and I think it's obvious looking at what you've done with the two movies. Of course, as we are in France, I will mainly focus on the French talents you've been using, but it's quite a long list.
Yeah.
From Rémi Chaillet, from Adrien Mérigot, from Bruno Coulet, even the editor for Kells was Fabienne, a French girl.
Working with her was like going to film school. I always wished I'd gone to film school. I went to animation school, so working with her, I learned so much again about editing. So it was painful though. Another thing I learned working with Fabienne was that she took like 10 minutes off of Secret of Kells that was final and in colour, and that was a painful lesson, but a good one that I learned.
Yeah, the result was there.
Yeah.
So you enjoy very much working with people coming with other backgrounds. I mean, the French, obviously, I mentioned, but that goes also with the Danish people and the Belgian people you met. I mean, you're a pure European.
Yeah, and the European co-production model is something that I've actually embraced, and it's kind of the way I want to make films now. I just clicked through a few frames there that kind of show Adrian's work. I mean, taking it from the most basic storyboard like that and making a scene illustrations based on references and research trips that we do together. And I mean, Adrian had been like 23 when he first came to the studio, and he was like...
So he was already working on Kells as animator? Or
he was a background artist, and then he ended up, I asked him to be the art director on Song of the Sea. And so we had an influx at the time that Secret of Kells went into production of artists from all over the world, from everywhere, Canada mainly for Skunk Fu, but for Secret of Kells, France, Belgium, Denmark, and we met so many people that way that, like I said at the very beginning, I was learning from everybody who was coming into the studio, and they were bringing ideas. Like a good example is the guys who set up Norlam. When they were interns in the studio, they showed me TV Paint, because they'd been using TV Paint, and we were still on paper. And then they ended up being co-producers. So there's a really good cross-pollination that goes on whenever talent comes in from outside, and we find ways to work together. You know.
Does that mean you want to stick to that model for your next project? I mean, to try to make it European, or because to end up the story of Song of the Sea, once again, the movie ended up at Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
So you went back to Hollywood. That's the limo. Okay.
Yeah, so I went to Young Irish Filmmakers, and I picked up a wife there, and then I brought her to the Oscars, so it's a nice story.
That's Hollywood.
That's the top of her head there, actually. Yeah. And that's the director of Big Hero 6 laughing that he beat us, so there's Paul. Paul and me always say that we're two-time Oscar losers. Anyway.
Well, it's not that often that, you know, a young director end up with 2 nominations in the Oscar.
Consecutive, and it was really amazing. And I mean, the way the Academy embraced us and really told us in no uncertain terms, some of the actual members of the Academy that I met after I joined. I joined the Academy after Secret of Kells, and became part of the nomination process for, you know, the years that I wasn't entering a film myself. And most of them were saying, we want to see more of what you're doing in Europe, and don't come over here and try to make like the Smurfs or something. That would be such a disappointment. We'd rather see you, you know. Actually, the Smurfs could be done really well if it was. But anyway, you know, the point is that like they were kind of encouraging us, and it kind of gave us, emboldened us to keep going and make more films like this, because it felt that there was an appetite and a hunger for it, you know.
So maybe the French wrap-up. Donc, la Song of the Sea, le deuxième film, qui commence en fait, qu'il a déjà en tête au moment où il finit Secret of Kells, toujours sous le long schéma d'une coproduction européenne, cette fois avec le Luxembourg, le Danemark, la France, avec d'autres partenaires. Par contre, il y a beaucoup de partenaires au niveau des talents, ceux qu'on vient de citer, qu'on retrouve soit de Secret of Kells à Song of the Sea, soit simplement parce qu'ils ont rejoint Song of the Sea, la musique restant toujours entre les mains de Bruno Coulet, à la différence qu'il a été partie prenante dès le tout début du film. Les portes des studios américains étaient ouvertes, évidemment, après le Secret de Kells, mais Tomm tenait à garder un contrôle précis de son film. Il avait une idée très, très claire de ce qu'il souhaitait faire. Donc toutes les suggestions qui avaient pu être évoquées, il les a étudiées, y compris celle de 3D stéréoscopique. Mais bon, finalement, il considère que la méthode qu'il avait employée pour le premier film fonctionnait suffisamment bien pour pouvoir être réédité. Et surtout, il avait envie d'aller relativement vite, puisque comme vous avez bien compris, le temps qu'il a fallu entre le pré-développement du Secret de Kells pour arriver à la sortie, il voulait aller beaucoup plus vite dans le second. Et de la même manière que pour Secret of Kells, le film a connu un accueil critique excellent à peu près partout, beaucoup de prix, beaucoup de festivals. Et de nouveau, il nous a montré une belle photo de limousine. On voit déjà que le standing commence à monter, qui l'emmenait aux Oscars à Hollywood, qui, selon leur vieille habitude, ont nommé un film américain. De toute manière, ça c'est pas lui qui le dit, mais le jour où un film européen ou français ou anglais ou irlandais sera nommé, sera vainqueur aux Oscars, il va falloir attendre encore un peu. Le protectionnisme existant très fort de l'autre côté de l'Atlantique. Bien.
Jean-Paul, excusez-moi, il va falloir conclure.
Oui, justement, on va aller très vite sur la fin. Voilà, pardon. Donc, so the next thing you've done is maybe the prophet, yeah.
Will I show that clip, or are we running out of time?
I think we are starting to run out of time.
Let's not do that. And maybe people have seen it already, so it's okay.
So, but just say a word about the prophet.
Yeah, I'll just explain about why I even included that in the presentation, because, whoops, no, don't do that. How do I go back to the
You want to go back to...
How do I go back to just the presentation?
No? You can't go there? That's the beginning.
Well, the whole Oscar thing was, I go really quickly through them all. The whole Oscar thing was really useful, not really to get Song of the Sea made, but it helped us make contacts. And one of the things that happened was the producers of the movie The Prophet, Salma Hayek and her team, saw Secret of Kells and asked me to do a chapter for that project. And that was a nice example of kind of service work that we'd been doing prior to that, where we were asked to just follow the style of whoever was hiring us, and this time they actually asked us to do something in our own style, or something that we developed the style for ourselves. So that was a nice step in the right direction, you know. But since we're running out of time, we won't show that. But we're very proud. They actually had to make that 5-minute section during the production of Song of the Sea. So it was our first moment for Ross Stewart had come back from Leica, and I asked him to co-direct that piece with me, and because I was so busy with Song of the Sea, and it was a good first run for Ross and I to co-direct, because we're going to co-direct my next feature together, Wolfwalkers.
Okay, on a juste 2 minutes pour 2 minutes. So I will translate briefly after that, but just maybe show us what currently you're working on.
Sure.
The work from Nora, you're helping to develop own
I'll leave this
first animated feature, no?
I'll leave this slide with all these famous people on it on screen, just so everyone knows that we know some.
Okay. You're a star. Now
we're
dealing with a star.
Look at these movie stars. And see, I didn't even have I was so mean I didn't even pay Getty Images for the rights to use that picture of me on the red carpet in Cannes with Salma. But anyway, what happened was that during Song of the Sea, Nora was developing The Breadwinner, which is our feature that's in production at the moment, and it's based on a book by Deborah Ellis, and it's being produced by Angelina Jolie. And she kind of came behind it, and it was the kind of project that, while Nora was developing it, I thought it would be really difficult, like the most difficult film that we'd ever tried to get off the ground, because to me it was a difficult subject matter. It was going outside of what we'd been known for before, and I didn't think it was hugely obvious as a commercial film, but I really believed in it because it was the kind of film that we wanted to make. But when Angelina Jolie got involved and some big name kind of producers got involved, the finance came together really quickly, and it actually ended up going into early pre-production at the end of the production of Song of the Sea. So now it's in...
And your role in Breadwinner?
What I did was I did some design work early on. I'm a creative producer or something like that. Yeah. And those nice titles. But early on I did some design work, storyboard work, because there's two sections. Nora has kind of blended the story of the book with a kind of backstory, a folklore story that the little girl is telling to her little brother. And in that folklore I saw an opportunity to do something that I felt more familiar with and more comfortable with. So I got involved in that story world part. In the end, that section has been art directed by a guy, again, with a French connection. He was in Le Poudrière, and he's from Iran, Reza Rezai. And Nora met him one time when she visited Le Poudrière for an end-of-year show. And it's actually been done with like cut paper, stop motion, mixed with digital techniques. And so it's that's become way better than what I was doing, but I did the early stuff on it.
And your last question, your next project?
Maybe I'll show a little bit of Breadwinner.
Of course,
and then I'll talk a little bit about Wolfwalkers. Yeah. Is that okay? Okay. Sorry about all this going in and out of the software.
Désolé du débordement horaire, Xavier. Faudra pas trop m'en vouloir.
Technology.
On a beaucoup de choses à dire avec Tom. Hein.
Technology is my old friend, but I asked Nora, could I show something from Breadwinner? So. Even though it's in production.
Dear Razak.
Louder, or I will have to take my business elsewhere.
Dear Razak, I hope this letter reaches you in Kabul. I'm writing to you with sad news. I am sorry to tell you that Khala Begum died on the way to her sister's wedding. The bus she was travelling on hit a landmine. Her injuries were too great to bear, and she died some hours afterward. I know this must be a great shock to you, but please note that when I last spoke to Hala, she told me of your kindness toward her. May Allah bless you now, guide your path, and give you courage. I'm sorry.
So anyway, just a little glimpse of that. But as I say, my involvement in Breadwinner ended up being quite minimal. After the initial design and a little bit of storyboards, I went back to focusing on my next feature, Wolfwalkers, and I'm co-directing.
We are back to Ireland, because with Breadwinner we are going far away from Kilkenny.
Oh no! I'm sorry, everybody. Can someone just? I can't see how to get back to the. Just go into the slides from the current frame. Oh well, I'm gonna have to do it this way. The hard way. Just a recap. Just it's like I'm dying and my life is flashing in front of my eyes.
No, I do the French thing if you want. Donc, ce qu'on a juste voulu dire, très très vite, c'est que les portes des studios, bien sûr, sont ouvertes encore plus avec le second film, mais que Tomm reste très attaché à la méthode de production qu'il a développée. Entre autres, il a été sollicité pour un film qui s'appelle Le Prophète, qui est sorti l'année dernière, pour lequel il a réalisé une petite section qu'on vous a très brièvement montrée, mais que vous pouvez trouver sur Internet facilement. Et puis, il a un rôle important depuis l'origine en tant que responsable artistique du projet de Nora, sa partenaire qui était dans le Secret of Kells, qui s'appelle Breadwinner, qui est un film qui est en production et qui commence à avoir belle allure puisqu'il a reçu le financement et la participation d'Angelina Jolie, qui est un film, bien évidemment, comme vous avez constaté, qui ne se passe pas en Irlande. Son prochain film à lui, ça sera ses derniers mots, et nous ramène à l'Irlande.
So, Wolfwalkers is set so different to Breadwinner. It's set in Kilkenny, which is the town I grew up in. Ross and I grew up in Kilkenny, which is a small town in Ireland, but in the time of the final real English conquest of Ireland, when Oliver Cromwell came to Ireland and in basically under a year completely crushed any Irish rebellion, and to symbolically show that he tamed the country. This is like 1650, kind of around the time of the English Civil War, and to show that and Kilkenny was the capital of Ireland at the time. So it was a really interesting period in Irish history. Dublin wasn't the capital, Kilkenny was the centre, and it was the kind of Catholic confederation, and they were putting together a kind of European co-production against the English with Italians and French people. So anyway, Oliver Cromwell decided to really stamp on the country and put his foot down and move all the Irish people off to the west and put English people in. And he would offer rewards for the English planters, they were called. And one of the rewards was that if you wiped out the wolves from the area so it could be made into farmland, you got to live on that land. So there was this influx of kind of people coming for a chance of a new life in Ireland. And so we have the story of an English hunter and his daughter who've kind of survived the plague and the Civil War in England, arriving in Kilkenny looking for a new life in exchange for exterminating the wolves. And what's really interesting when I came up with the idea with Ross was we were talking about the fact that in Kilkenny at that time, there was a strong belief in a kind of werewolf. They believed that St. Patrick had put a curse on certain families who refused to convert to Christianity, and that when they fell asleep, they would become a wolf. And so there was these stories of, kind werewolves around Kilkenny. But even during the witch trials in Salem in America, if you were from Kilkenny, you were immediately under suspicion of being a werewolf. And we thought there was a story there because the true history of the extermination of the wolves around Kilkenny and these legends, actually there was a confluence. And that's where the idea for Wolfwalkers came from, where basically this little girl, Robin, arrives to Kilkenny, and her father wants her to fit in with the new Puritan world that Oliver Cromwell is imposing on the country. And she makes friends with a little native girl called Maeve, and I won't give away the story, but you can imagine that she might discover that some of the wolves that she's hunting with her dad might actually be her new friends.
Okay. Donc en français, juste vous dire que le prochain projet le ramène en Irlande, et d'autant plus en Irlande que c'est à Kilkenny. Kilkenny qui au XVIIe siècle était donc la capitale de l'Irlande, ça n'était pas Dublin, à l'époque de l'invasion des Anglais. Et ce qu'il n'a pas dit, mais qui est intéressant à noter, c'est chaque fois il y a un animal dans les films de Tomm. Il y avait un chat qui avait un rôle très important dans Kells. Il y avait des phoques dans le Chant de la mer, et donc maintenant on va avoir les loups irlandais dans son prochain film. I think that's it. Sorry for the delay, and I want to thank you, Tomm, for... Thanks.